All right, good people. Happy Thursday. Happy Feast of Unleavened Bread. Hope everyone had a great First Fruits Resurrection Sunday. And we are jumping into our continued slow walk through Genesis. I'm going to recap for you last week because we left off when Abram and Lot split there and went their separate ways, and Lot went towards Sodom, and Abram was again promised, reminded of the promise by God of like, this is the land that I'm giving to you and your descendants are going to be many in number. And so we left off there, and Abram had actually relocated and went a little further south from where he was previously at. So I wanted to remind you of that so that as we read this story, it's a lot of names that's going to come up. It's a lot of different places that are mentioned, but I got y'all on the visuals. If you hop over to YouTube and you'll be able to see the PowerPoint, you'll be able to see the map because we need the visuals to make sure we are understanding what is happening in the story. But of course, we are in Genesis 14. And, if you ever need drama, I know people like to watch TV. If you haven't read the Bible, you don't really understand the amount of drama that unfolds in. I mean, Genesis alone has a lot. So there's always conflict. There's always some type of interesting story, and I just love it because it aligns with history. If you want to understand history, you need to make sure you're reading the Bible. You need to read Genesis because it's going to give you a good overview of like all the things that have taken place and how we have messed up, how God has provided, and we wouldn't do some of the things that we do if we read the Bible more often. So, welcome to Genesis 14. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as usual. If you would like to get the recap information, you can follow me on use the link in the description to follow my sign up, subscribe, excuse me, to my newsletter, and you'll have that information. So, let's go. And we are reading from Genesis 14, and we're going to read it through. Go stick with me, read it through just to get a gist, and then we're going to move over to the PowerPoint so we can get a better understanding. It says Abram rescues Lot. This is New Living Translation. About this time, war broke out in the region. King Amraphel of Babylonia, King Arioch of Elasar, King Lamer of Elam, and King Tidal of Goyim fought against King Bera of Sodom, King Bersha of Gomorrah, King Shinab of Admah, King Shemimber of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, also called Zoar. This second group of kings joined forces in Siddim Valley, that is the Valley of the Dead Sea. For 12 years, they had been subject to King Kedorlaomer, but in the 13th year, they rebelled against him. One year, King Kedorlaomer and his allies arrived and defeated the Rephaites at Eshtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzites at Ham, the Emites at Shaveh Karathim, and the Horites at Mount Seir, as far as El Paran at the edge of the wilderness. Then they turned back and came to En Mishpat, now called Kadesh, and conquered all the territory of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites living in Hazazon Tamar. Then the rebel kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela, also called Zoar, prepared for battle in the valley of the Dead Sea. They fought against King Kedorlaomer of Elam, King Tidal of Goyim, King Amraphel of Babylonia, and King Arioch of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. As it happened, the valley of the Dead Sea was filled with tar pits. And as the army of the king of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some fell into the tar pits while the rest escaped into the mountains. The victorious invaders then plundered Sodom and Gomorrah and headed for home, taking with them all the spoils of war and the food supplies. They also captured Lot, Abram's nephew who lived in Sodom, and carried off everything he owned. But one of Lot's men escaped and reported everything to Abram the Hebrew, who was living near the oak grove belonging to Mamre the Amorite. Mamre and his relatives Eshcol and Anar were Abram's allies. When Abram heard that his nephew Lot had been captured, he mobilized the 318 trained men who had been born into his household. Then he pursued Kedorlaomer's army until he caught up with them at Dan. There he divided his men and attacked during the night. Kedorlaomer's army fled, but Abram chased them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus. Abram recovered all the goods that had been taken, and he brought back his nephew Lot with his possessions and all the women and other captives. Melchizedek blesses Abram. After Abram returned from his victory over Kedorlaomer and all his allies, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh. This is the king's valley. And Melchizedek, the king of Salem and a priest of God Most High, brought Abram some bread and wine. Melchizedek blessed Abram with this blessing. Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has defeated your enemies for you. Then Abram gave Melchizedek a tenth of all the goods he had recovered. The king of Sodom said to Abram, give back my people who were captured, but you may keep for yourself all the goods you have recovered. Abram replied to the king of Sodom, I solemnly swear to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take so much as a single thread or sandal thong from what belongs to you. Otherwise, you might say, I am the one who made Abram rich. I will accept only what my young warriors have already eaten, and I request that you give a fair share of the goods to my allies, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Okay, now we're going to jump over to the PowerPoint so we can see it a bit more clearly. All right, so again, we are, um, I just titled it When Evil Catches You. I should have said Up to You, um, because this is talking a lot about like a battle, and this is catching up to Lot, essentially. Um, so, going back to the top, remember, Abram has moved from Bethel in Ai, sort of like north of basically northwest of Jerusalem. He's moved south of Jerusalem to Hebron. So it's giving us an introduction to the chapter, and it says about this time, war broke out in the region. This is giving us a time period of war. We know that we know where they are. We know how old Abram was a little bit before this started happening. When he initially moved, he was 75 years old. So this is sometime after he's 75, because he then went to Egypt and got kicked out of Egypt. He's moved to Bethel. Him and Lot split up. So this is probably a few years afterwards. And it's just giving us a reference of about this time. So we know that this is a time when there were 4 kings versus 5 kings. And it tells us why this happened. So you have the king of Babylon. I'm not going to say all these names because, of course, we're going to butcher it. It's not our tongue. We're going to butcher it. The king of Babylon, the king of Elasar, the king of Elam, and the king of Goyim. Okay, these are basically uh, Mesopotamia. All the different regions and tribes of Mesopotamia essentially went to war against Canaanite kings. So you have the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah. So Sodom and Gomorrah are almost like twin cities, if you will, near each other. You have Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar, or Bela. Now you will see that depending on what group of people and what time period it's in, different cities, it might be the same city, but it might have different names depending on the group of people who's referring to that city. So sometimes you'll see that in the Bible where something is in parentheses and it's really just basically, sometimes I guess a different language, but it's based on who named the city and then like how that name has maybe changed references to people over time. Same place though, so it'll say also called such and such. So you got this group of people, this group of kings from Mesopotamia against this group of kings from the Canaanite region. Now, I have it on a map so you can see Mesopotamia. Remember, we talked about Mesopotamia before. I talked about like current present day Iraq. So think about where that is. That's Mesopotamia. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers are right here. So all of these kingdoms are right up and through here. So you have Elam, Babylon, Elasar, and Goyim, which is Hittites. So that's Mesopotamia empire, if you will. And then you have the other kings. The other kings are really down here. I should have put this in the middle. The other kings are really down here. This is supposed to be like the Dead Sea down here somewhere. And so the other kings are in this region. So you have these kings who are in this large region coming against these kings who are in this small region. Are they all kings? Yes. Does that mean they're all at the same level? No. Again, this is a very sprawling region. Lots of people. This, not so much. These are much smaller city states, much smaller landscapes than what this is over here. So you got these people fighting. But the question is like, why were they fighting? So remember, it tells us that it is four kings against five, and you would say like, oh, well, at least they have five. But the reality is that this area is much smaller than this area is. So the preparation for war, the level of the kingdom, the size of the kingdoms are completely different. And so when it's breaking down the people who are fighting, you have to understand where they're coming from and that their lands are really just not that big. It's not really equipped for that to be going against war. So you'll see which is why it's important because this is why what happens. So it says the second group of kings joined forces in Siddim Valley. So that's talking about this group of five kings. They joined forces. They said like, all right, we've been paying tribute, meaning that they've had to pay money to this empire for 12 years. It says for 12 years they have been subject to King Kedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled against him. So this king over here, they're paying him. All these countries, nations, if you will, sorry, are paying him. This is present day Jordan, Syria, I think, is over here. Israel is paying Iraq essentially to they pay a tribute. Hey, we don't want to get taken over. We don't want you to do nothing to our people. We want to stay where we are. So because you're mightier and stronger, we're just going to pay you. How about we just contribute something to your treasury and that basically keeps somebody off their back? Y'all know how gangs do today. Gangs will be like, all right, you pay me a little bit. I'll keep such and such off your back and we'll call it even. That's essentially what was going on. But they rebelled. It says in the 13th year, they rebelled against him. They said, we're not going to pay him no more. So they're thinking that they are big enough and strong enough to actually stand up to this king. Well, that didn't go too well. So again, you got these five kings. They might think that they're mighty. They might think that they have very strong fortresses in their cities that nobody can penetrate. And now we're about to see what they're about to do. So 1 year later, so remember, 12 years they was paying it. The next year they said, we're not sending the money over to them. Maybe they thought that the land was too far away and they really wasn't going to retaliate. They would forget about it. The king said, my treasury is a little empty, so I'm gonna go and we're gonna fight these people for the money. Like y'all owe us money. You agreed to it, so now we're gonna fight. So it says 1 year later, verse 5, Kedorlaomer and his allies arrives. So this is giving us a layout of how like war works, right? So you have, let me go back. You have this king from here. These are his allies. That means they're friends. They are people who are going to go to war with him. If he say, hey, we in trouble, these people trying to take over, your allies are going to stand up with you. Obviously, these kings are all allies because they're standing up together against these people. But it doesn't go the way they think it's going to go. So it says 1 year later, so this is the 14th year at this point, Kedorlaomer and his allies arrived and defeated. Now, they defeat the people that they name are different from the people who they were actually about to fight against. So they came through. This map shows you, I know it says it with a CH, but that's literally like a different pronunciation. So depending on, remember I told you, depending on the group that writes the information, they might spell something a different way because they're the language that they have. So this one is spelled with a CH and the Bible is spelled with a K, same person, Kedorlaomer. All right, this is how they came in. They came through just like this. It's how almost how Abraham came through the region. They came and they fought these people here. That's the Rephites at Ashtaroth Carnum. They fought the Zuzites at Ham. Boom. So they came down here. They fought them, burnt that up. They fought here, burnt that up. Then they came down and they fought the Emites. Emites at Shava Curiatham. Okay, boom, fought them, came down here. And the Horites at Mount Seir. Horites at Mount Seir, boom, keep going. They're gonna fight the as far as this is all Horites from Mount Seir to El Paran. They kept fighting, kept going, boom, boom, and knock them out. Then they turn back because they done got to the wilderness, the edge of the wilderness here. It's the Negev going down in here. Then they go up, and it says they turned back and came to En Mishpat, now called Kadesh, and they fought the Amalekites. So they conquer all the territory of the Amalekites. They're conquering all these places. I don't know if these places were previously conquered, but if not, these places are currently now conquered. All right, so they fought against all these people. They get to the Amalekites. Then, now these are all mostly like Canaanite territories, remember? Then they go up some more and they get the Amorites. The Amorites are living in Hazazon Tamar. Now, Abraham is living with Mamre on Mamre's land, essentially. That's his neighbor. So he's not far. And Mamre is an Amorite, it tells us. So it's showing you on this map where Abram is and all this. So essentially what's going on is these people are going around everywhere and they fighting everybody. Abraham is over here minding his business. Well, Abram at this time, over here minding his good business. He ain't got a bone to pick with them. He not in that fight. He not with that tribe or those nations. He's minding his business. But then the rebel kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela, which is Zoar, prepared for battle in the valley of the Dead Sea. So those 5 kings prepared for battle against the other 4 kings who had come through and tearing up all the other nations around them. They fought against King Kedorlaomer of Elam, King Tidal of Goyim, King Amraphel of Babylonia, and King Arioch of Elasar. 4 kings, Mesopotamian kings, against 5 Canaanite kings. Okay. Then you have, as it happened, the valley of the Dead Sea was filled with tar pits. So, all right, imagine this. They come and they're like, all right, we got to fight these people. They coming for us. They go out and they go fight. It tells you that the Dead Sea is filled with tar pits for a reason. Because it says, as the army of the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. So we don't know nothing about the other 3 armies, but we know about Sodom and Gomorrah. As they fled, some fell into the tar pits, while the rest escaped into the mountains. So that tells you right there who won. Whoever flees is not the winner. If I get you to flee, you're not winning. So that means those 5 kings lost, and the 4 kings are winning. And 5 kings, they ran home, taking with them the victorious invaders. Then plundered Sodom and Gomorrah. So after they defeat the nations, then they go to their towns, because remember their town is north of the Dead Sea. So we over here. So Sodom and Gomorrah gets plundered, taking with them all the spoils of war. That means all of the jewelry, anything nice that they want to take back with them. Oh, they're capturing it and they're taking it. They will take people, they're taking food, they're taking supplies. They also captured Lot. And why would those things be all valuable? If I take people, guess what? Now I have slaves. So this is how, slaves happened back in that time as well. It's called spoils of war. So they also captured Lot, who was Abram's nephew, who lived in Sodom, and carried off everything he owned. So they stole from Lot as well. So remember, Lot was living near Sodom. So that means when they go to Sodom, they're going to see everything and they're going to want to take all of that. Run that. That's their payment. When you go to war, your payment is when you win the war, taking what is other people's, because you have now conquered them. So that's the people's payment. So they're going to take all that they can. And Lot, remember, it told us in the last chapter in 13 that he was very wealthy. He had servants of his own. He had cattle. He had flock of his own. So there was a good amount for the taking. And then he had people. He had servants as well. So here is how Abram gets involved in this story, because you know how people do. When your family in trouble, you feel compelled to come out and help. So they also captured Lot, who was Abraham's nephew and who lived in Sodom, and carried off everything he owned. But one of Lot's men escaped and reported everything to Abram the Hebrew. So this man was smart. He said, "Oh, I got to get out of here." And he ran over here. Now, this is not a short distance, but he ran to where he knew Abram would be. So he ran to Abram's home. Obviously, he knew that Abram had relocated and moved south. So he went to Hebron. Um, and it says, who was living near the oak grove belonging to Mamre the Amorite. Mamre and his relatives, Ashcal and Anar, were Abram's allies. So it's telling us that Abram had enough sense to know that even though he is a foreigner living in someone's land, he can befriend other people and develop allies. He don't have to live like they do, believe in what they believe, but they can be allies because they in the same land. Why would you live in the same land with other people and be against those people? It doesn't make sense. If I'm going to live peacefully in the land, I'm going to get along with the people. We might not be of the same family or same origins or whatever, but that doesn't mean I can't get along with you. So Abram was smart. He had allies. So his neighbors were his allies. His neighbor is Mamre. Mamre has relatives. Relatives are Eshcol and Anar, and they were all Abram's allies. So let's see what goes down. It tells us when Abram heard that his nephew Lot had been captured, he mobilized. Now, y'all, this is important details. He mobilized the 318 trained men who had been born into his household. Wait a minute now. They told us that Abram was wealthy. And we know that when he left Haran, he left with all of his people. But it never tells you how much. This man had 318 trained men who had been born into his household. They had been loyal for so long that they had families who had families who had families all born unto Abram. That's telling you how big and vast Abram's like community essentially is. Um, these are all people that he's leading and taking care of. Now he's not uh he's allowing them to work his land. He's allowing them to take care of his flock. So they all have like an even exchange of like work and care. But these people serve, if you will, Abram. These people are trained. That's smart. Abram is not just living in a foreign land like, oh, we're just here to stay. We're gonna be nice and quiet. No, they're trained men. They were smart enough to make sure that they were well trained in survival. It's crazy because we don't have any of these skills today. Trained men who have been born into his household. That just tells you how vast his community is. Okay. In addition to the people who are his allies, the neighbors, and who they have with them. So it says, then he pursued Kedorlaomer's army until he caught up with them at Dan. So boom, Abram leaves here. He pursues the army. He finds out his nephew Lot is in trouble and has gotten taken. They have gotten taken with the other four kings. So they trying to head back home. So here go Abram. He's pursuing them. He's running after them. He's going to get what's his. So then it says there. So when he's in Dan, there he divided his men, and attacked during the night. So now Abram has a war strategy. He says, we're not just going to go in during the daylight. They're not going to know we coming. We're going to sneak in at night. We're going to take what belongs to ours. We should take a lesson from Abram. We're going to sneak in at night and take what belongs to ours. So he divided up his men and sent them into the camp during the night. This is what was the result. Kedorlaomer's army fled, but Abram chased them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus. This is a far stretch right here. I'm not running that far to go chase nobody. But if you're in war and you're trying to defeat and you're trying to send a message, because we're not gonna hear nothing else about Kedorlaomer and Babylon and none of these other places for a long time. They fled. They had defeated all these other people, all these other. Let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They have attacked 8 different places. If Abram comes on the scene with 318 people, bust into their camp in the middle of the night and causes them to flee. They didn't fight back, they fled. It's no telling what the Lord sent to scare them, to frighten them, to make them go run. So it says Abram recovered all the goods that had been taken, and he brought back his nephew Lot with his possessions and all the women of the captives. Not he didn't just go get Lot. He went and got Lot. He recovered every single good that had been taken. He was able to bring back all of Lot's possessions, all the women, and all the captives. That means Lot didn't lose anything. Lot regained everything because his uncle came in and saved the day. Of course, through the grace of God. So, after Abram returned from his victory over Kedolamar and all his allies, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Shava. That is the king's valley. Okay, so the war is over. Kedolamar destroyed 8 different places. He took all the stuff. Essentially, everything he took gets returned, especially when it's concerning Lot. Now, Abram only got involved in this because it was told that Lot was taken. So, out of concern for his safety, his livelihood, his well being, of course, he's going to go rescue him. But I believe that Abram would have stayed right home and let them people do whatever they was going to do until he needed to get himself involved. So, after he returned, that means he went back. The king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Shava. And y'all remember the king of Sodom had already ran away from the previous war. Now, of course, everybody finds out that Abram has defeated him, so he goes out to meet him. Not in a bad way. This is a meet him to honor him type of way. And in verse 18 says, and Melchizedek, the king of Salem, and a priest of God Most High. Another word for God Most High in Hebrew is El Elyon, brought Abram some bread and wine. Melchizedek blessed Abram with this blessing. Now, it is believed that Melchizedek, it says king of Salem, is debated about where that is, right? So Salem on this map is shown here, which is the same place as Jerusalem. So they say that Salem is a shorter version of Jerusalem. Depends on the language that maybe it was being referred to. It could have also been a city that was over here in near Shechem. And Shechem was like a large sort of capital of this region at the time. So either way, Melchizedek was this king and priest. But I love it because it shows us something about the people who lived in different regions. Everybody was not against God. Everybody did not worship God. Obviously, after the flood, going back a few chapters, after the flood, everybody would have understood who God Most High is, who the creator of heaven and earth is. Excuse me. Somewhere along the line, though, different people allowed their ego, their pride to get in the way of their worship of the true and living God. Melchizedek is an example of someone who's in a nation who did not lose sight of who the true living God is, because he is referring to God Most High. That means he knows that there are other gods that exist, but he's referring to our God as God Most High. And he's using this opportunity to bless Abram. That obviously means that he is aware of and knows that Abram is sent by God, Abram is covered by God, and Abram has a blessing of God. And so he is essentially confirming the blessing that God already has for Abram. And so he blesses him with this particular blessing. It says, blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has defeated your enemies for you. So not only did he bless Abram, blessed be Abram by God Most High. So he's confirming that Abram is blessed by God. And he's also blessing God. And that made me stop and think, because he's blessing God because he said, who has defeated your enemies for you, right? So he's acknowledging how the whole transaction went down. You are covered, Abram, by God Most High. And God Most High has defeated your enemies for you. Like, it's demonstrating your blessings of by God Most High. I love that he made sure in that situation, not only did he bless Abram, he blessed Abram's God. He blessed God Most High, El Elyon. He blessed the creator of heaven and earth, along with blessing Abram, the creation, God's creation. And we should really take note of that in our own personal prayers and blessings, to bless God back. You know, it's like a Thanksgiving. You can be thankful for something, but like no, bless God for who He is and what He has done. And so in this instance, He is proclaiming that God has defeated your enemies for you. He's not taking the credit personally to say, "Oh, you defeated your enemies." He's saying, God Most High has defeated your enemies for you. He's recognizing this blessing that Abram has, this covering that Abram has, and that's an important distinction, just in our own personal lives. Okay. And then it says, then Abram gave Melchizedek a tenth of all the goods he had recovered. So after Melchizedek blesses Abram, remember he had recovered all the things that had been taken from all these places that the King Kedorlaomer had taken, and all his allies had taken from these different places, and all the things that they took from Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot's place and all that type of stuff. And Abram gave Melchizedek. Now, Melchizedek kind of comes out of the blue. He's not really in this war at all, but he's in this region. And so he's involved, obviously, in like the politics of the region and stuff. And so he kind of comes in out of the blue to, as a priest, to bless Abram. So there were good priests. There were people. It wasn't that, oh, let's say the eventual Israelites were the only ones who believed in who God was. That wasn't the case. Um, there were other nations that would have believed. It just happens that, of course, Abram is the one that's called to come to this land, to dwell in this land, and to be blessed in that land. So Abram gives, basically, Melchizedek blesses him, and so Abram gives him something. It's like to seal that blessing. So he gives a tenth of all the goods he had recovered. A tenth in this term is the tithe. So a lot of people talk about like this is like the first tithe given, similar to like the Cain and Abel offering that's given. So this is a tenth. So this is our first example of a tithe as a tenth of what he had. Um, I'm not pro or anti. Like I'm not getting into tithing as a 10% of golden rule type of thing. I'm just pointing it out that it was a tenth that Abram gave in this situation, but it wasn't of his stuff. It was of what he had recovered. You know, um, and so this is sealing the blessing that he just gave him. It says in verse 21, the king of Sodom said to Abram, give back my people who were captured. So this, remember, Sodom is there. King of Sodom is there. They all came out to meet him in the valley. The king of Sodom is there. And so he tells Abram, give back my people who were captured, but you can keep for yourself all the goods you have recovered. He's basically saying, can I just get my people back? Like Abram is in charge because obviously Abram has favor. Everybody can see that Abram has a significant amount of favor and covering because there is nobody else who would have been able to. 5 kings and all their people ran from 4 kings and all their people. But Abram, with his 318 people, went and defeated the 4 kings and got them sent out of the whole area. Right, so they recovered all the people. So the king wants, he really just wants his people back to be able to live and dwell in the land. But he said, all the goods, I don't care what it is, jewelry, gold, whatever it is, you can keep. And this is Abram's reply. And he's right in alignment with what Melchizedek just blessed him with, right? Because God did that for him. He understands his covering, his blessings come from God. Abram replied to the king of Sodom, I solemnly swear to the Lord God Most High, El Elyon, creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take so much as a single thread or sandal thong from what belongs to you. Otherwise, you might say, I am the one who made Abram rich. I will accept only what my young warriors have already eaten, and I request that you give a fair share of the goods to my allies, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. So essentially, Abram says to the king of Sodom, I don't want anything that you have because I don't want you to say that it's because of you that Abram is rich. So he didn't want um I'm referring to them as Canaanites. I'm assuming that they're Canaanites. I don't want this Canaanite to say that he's the one who made me rich because I know that it's God Most High who has blessed me and who has made me rich. So I don't want anybody to be able to say that they gave me a leg up and they put me on my platform or whatever. No, that's not that honor is not reserved for them. He said, now what I will accept is whatever my people have already eaten, we don't need to pay you back for it. It is taken care of. And I would request that you give, instead of giving it to me, you give it to my neighbors. You give it to the Amorites. That was Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Remember, Mamre is the neighbor, and Eshcol and Aner are his relatives, maybe cousins or something. So I'm going to ask that instead of giving it to me, you give it to them. And that's a blessing because guess where Abram lived? Abram is a foreigner living in the land of the Amorites. In order for him to even have favor with the people there, he already has favor with God. He has a lot of favor with man because they already know, this man, he's got something special on him and they don't touch him. However, he's blessing them even more. When he's coming into their land, they have done a favor for him by going out with him as an ally to go and retrieve Lot, his family member. So now he's doing a blessing back to them in the same way. Since you're offering, you can give it to my friends here. You don't need to give it to me. That's very generous, and that's smart. Like that's why that's wisdom being used to say like, I don't need this because I don't want you to be able to say this, but I do want to bless the people who have been a blessing to me and who have helped me and protected me and who are in my community. I want to give back to them. And that's the end of chapter 14. Now, here are some reflection questions that I want us to talk through as we reflect on chapter 14 that we just read about, how the war played out, and then you have how the blessing played out. What consequences are we suffering from our own choices? I ask that because Lot was captured, he was taken away from his home, almost never to be seen again, and he was suffering consequences because he had told us in the previous chapter that Lot had moved to Sodom. Sodom was already known as being an evil place, and he wanted to go move over there. He saw that the grass was greener on the other side, and he wanted to go to that grass. What consequences are we suffering from in our own personal lives because we think that the grass is greener on the other side? Instead of just admitting that, you know what, we're wrong, and maybe we need to undo some of the things that we've done or change course. So just keep that in mind about the consequences that are suffered. And sometimes most of the time, you will still suffer consequences. You can ask for mercy. It don't mean that you're gonna be exempt from consequences. It don't mean that, oh, because God saved me from this situation, that you don't experience any consequences of the situation. So sometimes you just have to endure faithfully because you know what? Sometimes we just do it to our own selves, and that's how we learn best. Okay. The other question I want to reflect on is: are we in the place that God needs us in? So Abram was at first living northwest of the Dead Sea. And once God told him to go everywhere in the land, go look in all these places, like this is the land I have given you. After looking around in the land, he decided to relocate and he moved south. Well, I believe he was in a place that he needed to be for situations like this. First of all, he was around the people he needed to be around. And when everything broke out with his nephew Lot, he could go and he was in a solid place where he could go and he could go seek to recover all that needed to be recovered. But Lot was not in the place that he really needed to be in because he was around evil. But Abram was. And so we really need to take time, and when we think about our lives, are we in the place, like physical location, geography place? Are we in the mental place? Are we in the right type of environment that God needs us to be in so that we can be used for whatever He has for us? The third reflection question is: have we considered our obedience to the authority that we are under? So, when you suffer consequences, sometimes it's due to the authority that you are under. And for instance, with Lot is living in the land of Sodom. That means he's under the authority of Sodom. The king of Sodom was under the authority of the king of Elam, which was what's his name? I can't even think of his name anymore. Kedolamar, yeah, Kedolamar. He was under he paid tribute to that king. So like you need to know who you're aligned with and who they are aligned with, because that's going to tell you a lot about the consequences that you could suffer. Because if somebody has bad alignment, or they break that covenant that they have, they break that promise that they have, the trickle down effect is going to come to you. So Kedolamar came after Sodom because Sodom stopped paying Kedolamar what they were supposed to be paying them. So guess who got almost killed? Lot and his family, and everything almost got ruined with Lot because he's under Sodom and Sodom is under Kedolamar, right? So you have to be obedient to the authority that you're under. If you don't like the authority that you're under, that means you're not going to be obedient. If you're not going to be obedient, you need to. It's probably a sign that you need to go from under that authority. If something is not right, and because you're then that's the only reason why you would be obedient, because something isn't right, then that's probably not good authority. And we get to choose our leadership a lot of times. So if you're at a job that leadership is not quality, you need to be praying and moving about some things. um, if there is something wrong with the authority in the relationships that you're in, you really need to evaluate and kind of question and go through working through that, because that authority is going to directly influence you in one way or another. Okay. Are we willing to do it outnumbered? Obviously, Abram was outnumbered. Abram knew he was outnumbered when he left with his people, but Abram had known enough about God, had seen enough about the miracles of God to know the promises that God has given him. To know that if he went for this, God was gonna help him defeat. I'm sure he prayed before he went. I'm sure he was probably already in prayer, because it wasn't like Abram was probably unaware that there was war breaking out in the land. He was probably already praying. He was probably already aware and being prepared for what he needed to be prepared for himself. So Abram was willing to go outnumbered, make a plan and a strategy to defeat the enemy, even though he was outnumbered, and he had victory. Are we willing to do outnumbered, or do we cower when we say like, "Oh, I can't do that. Oh, this system is too big. Oh, these people they too high up. They have all the money in the world. I can't. I can't. Are we willing to do it outnumbered? Because that's God's favorite odds. I'm gonna be very honest with you. There's not a time in the Bible where the Israelites ever went to war and they were the bigger number. It was always an outnumbered situation. Always. I think that's the way that God likes it, because he wants us to be able to recognize that it's not us that's doing it, it's him that's doing it through us. He will he will send people, he will send his first of all his angels go to war with us, and they will intimidate and scare off or defeat the in our enemies on our behalf without us having to do much except for show up. Like literally, if you just read through some stuff in Old Testament with Joshua and Kings, First King and Second Kings, literally time after time and time after time again, they were being outnumbered. The only time where they were allowed to be defeated is when the Israelites were in disobedience themselves to God, where God didn't tell them to go, or He said, "Don't have this idol with you when you go," and they disobeyed. And that's the only time that there was like that type of conflict. And then the final reflection is, are we in agreement with God's blessing? So Melchizedek blessed Abram. Abram in turn became in agreement with Melchizedek's blessing, because he gave him the tenth of what he had recovered from the war. Are we in agreement? If God has said something to you prophetically, whether it's directly to you, if it's through somebody else, are you in agreement with what God's word says about you, with what He has prophesied about you? Like, do you actually believe that you are a child of God? And are you in agreement with that? Are you acting, responding, walking as best you can in response to being in agreement with God's blessing? Or are you almost like actively working against who you are supposed to be in the kingdom of God? So that's the last question I want to leave you with. Are you in agreement with God's blessing? Because if you're not in agreement with it, you're not going to be able to receive all that God has for you. I mean, Abram was one who was already blessed, but he allowed someone else to be able to bless him, and he blessed them back. And then he was even more generous with his neighbors, because he is in agreement with God's blessing. When Abram told the king of Sodom No, I don't want to take anything from you. I solemnly swear to the Lord, the God most high creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take so much as a single thread or a sandal thong from what belongs to you. Otherwise, you might say, I am the one who made Abram rich. That's him being in agreement with God's blessing. He knows that God already told him that you're good. You're gonna be a wealthy man. You're gonna be have descendants as numerous as the stars, as numerous as the sand on the seashore. He had already had that promise. So Abram responded, even in his dealings with the king of Sodom, as like, no, you're not gonna be able to tell nobody that you made me rich. I have a God who takes care of me. That's being in agreement with what God's blessing already is. When we speak, we should be speaking in agreement with the blessing that God has already given. What are the blessings that God has given? What are the promises that He has given? If you don't understand that, that's something that you need to do your own research on in the Bible. Like, what are His promises? His promises are yes and amen. His promises that He will never leave you nor forsake you. His promises that if you are His child and you submit to Him, that He will give you what you need. Like, it's so many promises, especially in Psalms as you read, like all those promises of David. David did not make those promises up for himself. He knows that those are promises for him and his people, and we are God's people. We have the same promises, the same blessings, but we have to speak as though we are in agreement with those blessings. And a lot of times that's where we fall short as people, because we are not speaking in agreement with what God has already told us. But we want to go pray for more. But we're not acting in agreement. We're not moving by faith in what He has already told us to do. But we want to hear from God. Oh, I just need a prophecy. Oh, I need somebody to speak a word. I need some prayer. And God is like, it's already right there. Like, if you just open up your Bible, if you just read, if you give it a chance, you will see that. Open your eyes and you will see that it's already right there for you. But you have to be in agreement. That means you have to sow in agreement. So when you do give, you need to give in agreement. That's what Abram did. He gave. Your tithe should be giving in agreement with what God's blessing is. Um, and so that's where I want to close out today, making sure that you understand how you're supposed to act in agreement with God's blessing, so that it's something that is a benefit to you, and you're not suffering unnecessarily because you're speaking ill of your own self, and your own blessing. So I hope that that has been helpful for you all, and that um, if you have questions, you can pop them in now. But next week we'll be going over Genesis 15. And so, per usual, if you would like the information as far as the newsletter, you can go to the link that's in my profile. You can subscribe to my newsletter. You'll get that tomorrow by 12 noon your time. And then you can go in and interact with the Bible study guide. You can just simply go and click through it, and you can add that to um, your own Canva account, and you can do it on your own and fill in the blanks and kind of just use it as a study guide and a reference tool. Because when you do go back to the Bible, because you will read Genesis again, you will have an additional reference tool already ready for you that I'm uploading and updating every week. So it has been a pleasure. I don't see any questions coming through, but I am thankful that you all are here. And again, I look forward to seeing y'all next week. Have a good one. Be safe.